Welcome, readers. Welcome to the second part of the book review, An Odyssey in War and Peace. Last time we discussed the first part of the review where we discussed about Lieutenant General Jacob's overall career till 1971. Now let's proceed further. So, in chapter 7, 8, and 9 of this book, they are entirely dedicated to the 1971 war. In these chapters, Lieutenant General Jacob discussed the background of the 1971 war, the war strategy employed, the preparation made for implementing this strategy, the key players on both the sides who implemented this strategy, and how the Mukti was formed, the role of the East Pakistani Army and its officers in this regard, whether or not they received cooperation from the Indian Army, whether India succeeded in presenting its case in the international media, the role of the then Chief of Army Staff in capturing Dhaka, whether the three branches of the military worked together or if there was discord among them, the extent of cooperation received from the Indian intelligence agency RAW, and finally, how the war was won. Regarding all of this reveals a different perspective. Lieutenant General Jacob presents some different facts than the known history of the 1971 war. For example, we have been told that then Army Chief Manek Shah opposed starting the war in April 1971, when actually the issue of Bangladesh and issue of refugee started troubling India. However, according to Lieutenant General Jacob, Manekshaw had called him to say that the government wanted to send troops to East Pakistan. But Lieutenant General Jacob told him that this was possible uh, from the point of view of military preparedness. This was not possible from the point of view of the military preparedness, and gave his opinion that all preparations would be completed by November 15th. Now there was certain reasons behind that. As we know that after April, or maybe in the beginning of the May June, okay, the monsoon starts in Indian subcontinent. Okay, so certainly Bangladesh is the part of the India subcontinent, so there also monsoon get affected. The second part is that Bangladesh is comprising of full of big rivers like Meghna, Brahmaputra, really, then even Ganga, really. And then in rainy season, these rivers are flooded in such a way that it is very difficult to cross those rivers. So these are some of the challenges which are prominent considering the army movement, and because of that, Lieutenant General Jacob had opposed the idea of starting the war or uh, sending the army in East Bengal in the month of April, really, because he himself was not sure about that. And then, if at all, you must have seen the movie Sam Bahadur. There also, the same justification has been given by Sam Manekshaw, okay, in the cabinet meeting. Really. Anyways, let's proceed further. He also mentions that the then Bengal state government was unwilling to cooperate with the central government regarding refugees. However, Lieutenant General Jacob specifically mentioned the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangha, that is RSS, about their help, okay, in handling the refugees. The RSS not only helped the refugees but also helped the army in digging the trenches and sending the refugees back to their homes after the war. So it was what you can say is that unnoticed contribution, or rather RSS didn't advertise about their work really, and that is the beauty of their work really. But then Lieutenant General Jacob had given the due credit to RSS for their help. Lieutenant General Jacob also sheds light on the initial instances of excessive adventurism by the BSF and its ultimate contribution to the entire war. So initially BSF thought that okay, they can intervene and they can easily defeat the Pakistani army, but then that was not the case really, and they have to burn their fingers in the efforts really. He also describes how the Awami League leadership, who had fled East Pakistan, formed the government in exile of Bangladesh in Calcutta, and what Lieutenant General Jacob's role was in forming that government. He also describes how Bengali officers from the Pakistani Deputy High Commission in Calcutta were brought into the struggle and how this put General Manek Shah in a difficult position with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi earlier. So incidentally, the story is something like this that whatever the steps Lieutenant General Jacob had taken to form this government, Manik Shah was not fully aware of that. And when uh, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi came to know, she was very happy and she congratulated General Sam Manik Shah for these efforts. But then he was unaware of all these things really. So it is interesting to read okay how that whole incident took place. Then we find details about how training camps were set up for the Mukti Bahini, their capacity, and what General Maneksha's expectations were. Due to the lack of updated maps of Bangladesh with the Indian Army for war preparations, he has mentioned how the army overcame that deficiency and how the employees of the Survey of India helped in this regard. For any war, maps of a terrain where we are going to fight the war are important. And if at all you don't have the updated maps, okay, then your army movements may not be so easy. Lieutenant General Jacob also mentioned the 1987 operation in Sri Lanka in this regard. He argues that Indian military officers did not learn any lessons from the Bangladesh war and that we landed in Sri Lanka without complete maps. And according to then Army Chief General Sundarji, the operations, which should have been completed in 72 hours, dragged on for 3 years and ultimately failed. So, here we come to know what is the importance of updated maps of any terrain where you are going to fight. According to Lieutenant General Jacob, he did not receive much help from RAW. However, I recently read one book from one journalist from Express Group. His name is Ravi Amble, and the name of the book is Raw: A History of India's Covert Operations. Of course, this book is in Marathi, okay, and then we will try to get the review of that book as well. Okay, in near future. However, okay, in this book, uh, altogether different uh, information is provided about the contribution of Raw in 1971 war. It may be possible that then political and high military leadership, for security reasons, did not allow Lieutenant General Jacob to establish direct contact with the raw officers, and maybe raw officers doing their operations okay in altogether different frame. The Bangladesh liberation movement was not getting the desired publicity in the international media. The American government was deliberately ignoring the atrocities committed by Pakistan in Bangladesh. On this occasion, It is worth reading how Lieutenant General Jacob, using his sources, engaged international journalists like Nicholas Tomalin and Sidney Schanberg to try to sway world opinion in favor of India and consequently the Bangladesh liberation movement. Lieutenant General Jacob observes that the Ministry of External Affairs was not particularly proactive in this regard and that its officers had much to learn. There was absolutely no communication between the Air Force chief and the Army chief, which created obstacles in coordinating operations between the Air Force and the Army. Lieutenant General Jacob provides details on what measures were taken in this regard. Lieutenant General Jacob provides interesting details on how the Pakistani secret communication system was breached and how we learned when Pakistan would start the war. This includes mention of deciphering messages from the Pakistani submarine PNS Ghazi, and then we all know the incidents of drowning the PNS Ghazi. Even uh, many of you may have watched that movie as well. Really, okay. So this is one of the interesting episodes, really, through which we come to know that when exactly the Pakistan is going to start the war, and then because of that information, we were able to protect our airfields. So even if on the 3rd of December, Pakistani Air Force are attacked our airfields, okay, they were able to create a very minor damage, really, and then we were able to save our uh, uh, planes as well as airfields. In the 8th and 9th chapter, Lieutenant General Jacob provides details on who devised the Bangladesh war strategy and how. Then, what the four main objectives of the strategy were, what General Manekshaw's and government's objectives were, who prepared the war plan, and how the necessary planning was done according to this plan. According to him, no institution in India taught or reflected on war strategy. Whatever strategy was devised was limited only to brigade or division level tactics. So, strategy and tactics, these are the two different things. Okay, strategy is a holistic approach about how to fight the war, and tactics are generally played, okay, at a field level or a battlefield level. So, strategy is built considering the long tenure of the war. Really. That is not the case with the tactics. Now, I personally disagree with this statement. This situation is unlikely with capable military officers like General Thimaya and General Thorar leading the military at that time. So here I disagree with Lieutenant General Jacob that we didn't have the leadership who can think strategically. Really. However, more information needs to be gathered in this regard. According to Lieutenant General Jacob and according to quotations from the book of Air Chief P.C. Lal, our political leadership had no clear objectives regarding Bangladesh, and the military leadership lacked a comprehensive strategy that included all branches of the military. There were also two factions among the then military officers regarding the two ultimate objectives. Lieutenant General Jacob and officers in his group believed that the capturing Dhaka should be the main objective, while General Manekshaw and the officers in his group believed that capturing the ports like Khulna and Chittagong should be the main objective. General Manekshaw also believed that China might launch some aggression while India was at war with Pakistan. Therefore, he deployed two divisions on the Chinese border. But Lieutenant General Jacob was sure that China would not do anything like that. How he and Major General Inderjit Gill used those troops without informing General Manekshaw is also worth reading. We are certainly proud of our army, but are all officers in the army capable and efficient? Were there and are there officers in the Indian Army who engage in sycophancy of superiors and backstabbing of others to serve their own interests? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. There were some such examples in 1971 war as well. Lieutenant General Jacob had provided details of those operations with certain examples. To prevent Bangladesh from falling out of its hand, Pakistan devised a strategy to defend the main cities and ports of Bangladesh. In response, the Indian Army devised a strategy to bypass the main cities and advance towards Dhaka via secondary roads. How this strategy was implemented, what obstacles were encountered in implementing this strategy, what political maneuvers were used to prevent China and the US from interfering in this war, what kind of help Russia provided, and how the movements of various military units, the contribution of other military branches along with the army, etc. Reading all these details gives us the experience of being on the battlefield itself. Okay, so this part of the book is very interesting, okay, very enlightening, and which gives us the clear picture of 1971 war. Lieutenant General Jacob has also written in details about the contribution of the Mukti Vahini in this war. Since the beginning of the war, the US, now during this period, George Bush was the US representative to the in the United Nations. So, along with US, some other countries were constantly trying to stop the war because they could see Pakistan's defeat. But every time Russia used its veto power to thwart these attempts. In the meantime, the US 7th Fleet had arrived in the Strait of Malacca. All of this put tremendous pressure on India's political and military leadership. Therefore, the military leadership was trying to end the war by achieving its objective as quickly as possible. When our army reached near Dhaka, there were 26,000 Pakistani soldiers in Dhaka and our troop strength was barely 3,000. This is surprising to hear. Yet, why did the Pakistani army surrender? What events took place on December 13th, 14th, and 15th? What message did the Indian army get, and how did the Indian army take advantage of it? Why did General Niazi not receive reinforcement from West Pakistan? Because of the atrocities committed by the Pakistani army on the people of Bangladesh, the public opinion there was very angry. And this could have resulted in attacks on General Niazi and his soldiers. What did the Indian army do for their safety? What were the terms and conditions of surrender? How was the surrender ceremony organized? We find answers to all these questions in the 10th chapter. Lieutenant General gives an example in this chapter of how biased the Western media was. When he was going to meet General Niazi with Pakistani officers, some Bangladeshi freedom fighters stopped their car. But they stopped after seeing Lieutenant General Jacob's uniform. However, they did not want to let go of the Pakistani officers with him. Then Lieutenant General Jacob came forward and persuaded these people. A journalist from Times magazine who was present there wrote that Lieutenant General Jacob threatened to shoot those people. Lieutenant General Jacob says that he was unarmed at this time. So we find many such anecdotes in this chapter about the biasness of the Western media. In 1971 war, the 1971 war was the next chapter in Hitler's Blitzkrieg tactics. In just 13 days, the Indian army advanced as far as Dhaka and brought a new nation into existence. There is no other example like this in the history of the world warfare. Pakistani documents describe this war in the following manner. The Indians planned and executed their offensive against East Pakistan in a textbook manner. It was a classic example of thorough planning, minute coordination, and bold execution. The credit clearly goes to General Jacobs' meticulous preparation in the Indian Eastern Command and its implementation by his corps commanders. Lieutenant General Jacobs spent his final years in military service as the GOC in C in the Eastern Command of the Indian Army. During this tenure, he was actively engaged in combating Naga and Mizo insurgents. He elaborated extensively on topics such as the central leadership perspective, the viewpoint of political parties in the northeast states, illegal immigration from Bangladesh supported by the local political leaders, and the central leadership stance towards regional parties, then led by Indira Gandhi, who strongly advocated for the merger of the all northeastern political parties into Congress. So she used to believe that all the northeastern regional parties should get merged into the Congress, and which was the point of opposition, okay, from those regional parties. Lieutenant General Jacob cited a specific instance from Tripura, where the chief secretary complained about the then Chief Minister Sengupta encouraging illegal immigration to alter the state's ethnic composition. When confronted, Sengupta claimed he acted under Indira Gandhi's directives, a claim later disproved by Jacob's inquiries. This incident highlighted how political leaders often compromise national security for the electoral gains. Lieutenant General Jacob also wrote about the emergency, stating that it was imposed at the suggestion of Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray, a prominent West Bengal politician and his personal friend. An amusing anecdote involving the Eden Garden Cricket Stadium, which was under military control, described how Ray attempted to construct a pavilion without military approval, leading to objections from the military authorities. The resolution of this conflict reveals much about the dynamics of civil military interactions at that time. When the Marxist government took over, Jacob described his relationship with them in details. He also recounted interactions with military delegations from Iran and Iraq during this period. An Iraqi officer sought advice on defending against a potential Iranian attack, and Jacob's guidance proved invaluable to Iraq when actually Iran and Iraq war was fought. On the subject of Sikkim, that we know that Sikkim got integrated into India in a later stage. So, on this subject, Jacob expressed discontent over the methods employed. He also critiqued the military action at the Golden Temple, citing a British era precedent to argue against the deployment of troops in religious places. Regarding the Mizo insurgency, he lauded Ajit Doval, India's current national security advisor, as a brilliant and efficient IB intelligence officer. Post retirement, Jacob worked in the private sector before joining the BJP as a security advisor in 1991. He shared candid opinions about senior BJP leaders, including Kushabhau Thakre, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani, then Murli Manohar Joshi, and Pramod Mahajan. He detailed his strained relationship with Mr. Pramod Mahajan, which he believed cost him a nomination for the presidency. The important responsibility he undertook in his later life included serving as the governor of Goa and Punjab. During this time, Goa was experiencing extreme political instability. In this context, the 1998 crisis in the Goa Legislative Assembly, where then Chief Minister Rane attempted to prove a majority in the assembly through a voice vote despite lacking majority support, was addressed by Lieutenant General Jacob in his capacity as governor through constitutional actions. This was challenged in a court. Subsequently, due to overall political instability, President's rule was imposed in Goa. With the assistance of just two advisors, Lieutenant General Jacob managed to bring discipline to Goa's administration and implemented significant reforms. This entire sequence of events is quite fascinating. The public sentiment regarding his work, as reported by various media outlets, can be found in the appendix. So that is very interesting to read. When he was appointed as the governor of Goa, he resigned from the membership of the Bharatiya Janata Party, that is BJP. The reason being that a governor should remain neutral. In this context, he shared an anecdote. After his appointment as a governor, a BJP leader from Goa approached him and said, "Any decision you make or policies you formulate, please inform me at least 3 days in advance before making them public." To this, Lieutenant General Jacob responded with a sharp retort. However, Lieutenant General Jacob made a significant and pointed remark that politics is the last refuge of the scoundrels and roughs. And then you know how it is true, really. The kind of people we find in politics, really. So, if you compare those people with this remark, you can understand the facts. In the 1999 Kargil War, Jacob's expertise in artillery was sought and he served as an observer, okay, on front. He provided striking details including the deployment of 250 artillery guns and firing of 250,000 shells. So it's a big number. He termed Kargil a classic example of artillery warfare. Despite recommending strategic measures to then Prime Minister Vajpayee and Defence Minister Fernandes, he observed that bureaucratic delays took 5 years to implement them. He praised Fernandes for swiftly arranging ammunition supplies from Israel, highlighting the challenges posed by shortage during the war. He also recommended a road link from Himachal Pradesh to Ladakh, which materialized later as the Atal Tunnel under Modi's government. Jacob criticized the inadequate use of Air Force during Kargil and noted that India's military resources and manpower were insufficient for its needs. He concluded his career as the governor of Punjab, where he helped develop Chandigarh as a potential IT hub with Narayan Murthy's assistance, making it an emerging center after Bengaluru, Chennai, and Pune. In his reflections, Jacob made several notable observations. So, noting down some observations. Jewish students in Kolkata faced discrimination from the British teachers, but Jews were always respected and assimilated in India. So, it's not that in Europe only Hitler was hating the Jews, even other countries were also not so much for the Jews. Senior officers in British military treated Indian officers fairly and without prejudice. Corruption in arms procurement existed even during post-independence years, with ineffective leaders like Biji Kaul damaging the military's reputation. India's defense spending remains inadequate relative to its GDP. Bureaucracy often hampers the timely implementation of strategic recommendations. China is India's most significant adversary, and the military's resources are insufficient for its security needs. Now, hopefully, after the Galwan incidents, the situation may have been changed, really, but then I am not the expert to comment on this. Then, the last but not the least, the role of military officers, spouses in decision making is growing, sometimes undesirably. Now, these are the observations made by General Jacob. Some of them you may agree with, you may not agree with, but then finally we have to take them as observations. The appendix of the book provides additional insight into Jacob's legacy. He lamented the lack of recognition for his contribution in public discourse, especially in contemporary media like YouTube, where discussion on the 1971 war and military affairs rarely mentioned him. So, this is what is the General Lieutenant General Jacob's autobiography is all about. So it is really interesting to read. Okay, uh, means although his army career was from 1941 to 1978, his administrative career was after that, and then he was active in the public life almost till 2014-15. So if at all we see, it is almost uh, 65 to 70 years of huge experience he was carrying, and that experience is getting reflected in his autobiography. So I insist all of you to read this autobiography. Okay, you will get a lot of insight about the Indian Army, Indian politics, and overall Indian paradigm. Thanks a lot. So here I am ending the part 2 of this autobiography. Okay, stay safe, keep reading. Goodbye.